Hello Dave is brought to you ad-free by my supporters on Patreon. Become a Patreon yourself and get your name listed as a supporter at the end of every video by following the link in the video description.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Hello Dave with Down to Earth Astronomy. Today we're going to talk about the failed Gnosis jump and the outrage that has caused in the Elite Dangerous community. Frontier is implementing a new mission server, which we're going to have a look at as well. Then we're going to move in and have a look at some real space news, and it turns out that the hole that I mentioned last week in the ISS might not have been a meteor strike, but might actually have been man-made. And then I'm quickly going to touch upon the live stream tomorrow. Before we start though, I just have a few things I want to mention. This is recorded a little bit early because of a busy weekend. Normally I would record this on Sunday afternoon. This is now Saturday morning instead. So if there's been some developments over the weekend, I'll not be able to get those in today. I'll cover those next week. And also, I've been sick for the last couple of days, so if my voice is a little rough, that's why, and I'll try to edit out the worst coughs along the way. Okay, let's get started with the Geonosis event. Now, if you weren't aware, if you for some reason haven't really been following what's been going on the last couple of days in the league, the Gnosis is the Canon Research megaship, and the way it works is they can send jump plans to Frontier, and once they've been accepted, they are set in stone apparently, they cannot be changed. So Canon planned a jump into the cone sector, which so far has been an inaccessible area of space. But there were some systems deep within a permit-locked zone that were not permit-locked, and Canon planned a jump so they could get over the permit-lock and into the small cluster of systems in the middle that was so far has been inaccessible. That of course created a lot of hype in the community, and a lot of people began preparing ships to join the Gnosis on this jump. Now before the jump actually happened, Frontier ended up permit-locking the destination system, because apparently it was a mistake that they were not permit locked, but they also said that it's not going to affect the jump plan. So according at that point to Frontier, it was still go for jump. Now on the day of the jump, things began to go wrong. Now before the jump, there has been some news from the Pilot Federation in game and from Aegis saying, "Oh, this could be dangerous. You should be careful. Guys, don't do this." Kind of warnings. But Canon, they went ahead with the jump anyway. Not like they had a choice. But in-game wise, they role-played as no, we're going to do the jump anyway. But in reality, they didn't actually have a choice. And of course, the jump ended up being failed. And they only managed to jump, I think, 12 light years or something like that. And the Gnosis ended up stranded, being attacked by Thargoids. Now, the problem with this whole event was that, first of all, a Galnet article was released 5 hours before the jump stating that the Gnosis was already being attacked. So that was launched way too early, which of course meant a lot of people were fleeing the ship, but those who weren't online at that time or for some other reason didn't read the news, were of course still on the ship. And a lot of those players had, of course, prepared for the exploration trip. Now, and this created a lot of negativity, because all those exploration players, they suddenly got a bait and switch from Frontier and was now forced into a combat event because, of course, the Gnosis was completely surrounded by Thargoids. And it's not only that they did a bait and switch and they moved over to a combat event rather than an exploration event. This also came with a lot of both bugs but also unforeseen effects. One effect was with all the Thargoids around the ship, they would shut down, neutralize you when you undocked. So before your ship was even released by the docking clamps, your ship would already have turned off, and you would then be sitting on the outside of the Gnosis, being shot up by several Thargoid ships. And if you weren't in a combat ship, there was a good chance your ship would be dead before you even got a chance to leave the docking pad. Which of course made people very angry that they prepared for the exploration trip and what they got from Frontier was a rebuy screen instead. Now, there was also a huge amount of bugs. First of all, not only Thargoids, but also like game bugs. First of all the Thargoids were flying around inside the no-fire zone of the ship, meaning that if you actually managed to get out of the ship and engaged them, you would get a fine and a bounty, meaning that if you got killed, you would then be sent to the nearest detention center, which is in the California Nebula. So now you're stuck in a combat ship over 1,000 light years away from the bubble. Good luck getting back. Then there was the problem that if you were then just ignoring the fines, and you were trying to deal with the swarms that the Thargoids would obviously have, in the beginning the Gnosis would then fire its point defense and shoot down your munitions from your flak cannons, making it essentially impossible to fight the swarms. Then there was the issues with solo players being mixed into open, so sometimes when people logged into open at the Geonosis, logged into solo at the Geonosis, they would actually be put into an open session. I have no idea how they managed to screw that up. They must really be digging in at something very deep in order to do that. But that was an issue that was quickly resolved, but still. And the list goes on, of course. There was also the issue with the Thargoids not being rendered. This is a common issue when you have several people joining a Thargoid fight, especially several people not in a wing. That some of the Thargoids will not be rendered, or the rendered model will be dislocated from the actual position of the ship. So let's say you can see the ship in one location, but the shots are actually coming from a location like 2 kilometers away, and that's where the ship actually is, that's where the hitbox is, that's where you need to shoot, but the actual model that you can see and that you will target and log on to, the rendered model, is located somewhere else. So that made it quite difficult for some to fight, because, well, you're being shot at by invisible Thargoids that you can't see, can't target, and thereby can't shoot back at. So that made things very difficult. So all in all, it's been very poorly received, and there's been a lot of outlash towards Frontier for this. Canon has been out with a statement saying that at least some of the guys over there are going to boycott Frontier and not buy any more paint jobs or anything from them that cost money, at least, until Frontier begins to listen a little bit more to the community. And I personally, I had an alt on the ship, and I was planning to stream it. Now, obviously I didn't, both because, well, as you could probably hear now, my voice is getting a little rough, and doing that for 2 hours, live stream for 2 hours, probably would have been a good idea at that time. But also, I didn't really feel like there was anything for me to do. Again, I prepared for an exploration event, and I was in a exploration-fitted diamondback with no weapons and very low shields. So what I would be able to show you if I were live streaming was me undocking, me getting killed, me spawning in. I would probably actually spawn in a bubble because I didn't have a fine, so that would be okay. If I didn't spawn back on the Geonosis, I'm not sure. But anyway, I would probably just be killed over and over again, trying to get out of the instance at the Geonosis, at which point it would just be in some system that was probably already explored. So, not a whole lot, and that's why I decided not to stream it anyway. But yeah, this has all resulted in a lot of negativity, and especially around the fact that Frontier seems to be so completely disconnected with the community and what the community actually wants. And there have been some people are saying that Frontier is getting too high. They are saying, "Oh, we are the gods, we know best." And yes, this of course obviously there's been very, very much negativity around this. But in other news from Frontier, this actually came out on Friday, that Frontier is going to NQ4. So this is the patch where they previously removed the fleet carriers. They're now going to implement a dedicated mission server. So right now the game server that handles all requests also handles mission boards. But they're now going to make that a separate server. Now this is of course all backend, and it's going to have very little effect on the actual game. But there is well, I'm not sure if it's a side effect or if it's the intended effect. You can argue, but the point they're making is we're doing this for better performance, and it's going to be slightly better performance, they say. So it seems like a huge investment for a slightly better performance. I think the main reason they're doing this is because it's going to kill board hopping. Because it's a separate server now, they're going to be able to store a board per commander. That means whether you go to open, you go to solo, or whatever group you go to, you would always get the same mission board. Now, there's been a lot of confusion about this, saying that, oh, how are we now going to grind materials at Dav's Hope and stuff like that. This does not affect Dav's Hope in any way. This is only mission board refreshing. I would expect that you're still going to be able to, at places like Dav's Hope and other stuff, the Jameson Crash Cobra, where you would want to collect your materials, that you're still going to be able to log out, log back in, and everything will respawn. Now, in reality, of course, right now we pretty much reliably only have two boards. We have the solo board and we have the multiplayer board. I often find that the private group and open is often the same board you get there. There are some ways to try and get a different board in the private groups, but in general, you would often only see two boards. So effectively what they've done is they reduced the number of available missions at a station by half. So to redeem themselves a little bit, they have increased the payout across the board on all missions by 10%. Now, that of course is still going to mean a net reduction in the payout, but there's pretty much only a short post. I'll make sure to link that in the description if you want to read it yourself. They haven't gone into a lot of details with are they going to increase the number of missions on the board? And a lot of people are saying, oh, now that you're doing this, could you add a refresh button instead? Overall, I think it's nice that they're actually not afraid to look at the back end. I've for a long time saying that they should really begin to look into their crappy netcode, where the whole P2P connection and instant thing is just not working very well in the game. So it's nice to see that Frontier is actually working on the back end, but however, I do feel like it's a bit of a nerf that they are removing board flipping, whether you liked it or not. And not just for money making, of course, going to take a hit to money making, but BGS, so background simulation factions, they are going to take a massive hit. Because BGS, what they would do, you would often want to work for only a single faction in the system. But now that you're not going to be able to get multiple boards, that means you're going to have a very limited amount of missions available, especially if it's a faction that does not spawn a lot of missions. Some factions will spawn 20, 30 missions, where others might only spawn 5 per board. So if you want to work for a faction that only spawns 5 missions per board, well, it's going to be tough because you're not going to have a lot of missions available to you. And there's also the question of refresh time. Right now, I think the refresh time of a mission board is about 10 minutes. So if you have a mission board and you wait 10 minutes and you go back to it, it should have refreshed. Question is if that's going to stay the same, because that effectively means you can just sit and get a new board every 10 minutes. But again, that's going to be very boring, I guess, gameplay to do. Overall, it is, I think, going to hurt both BTS, but also it's going, of course, to hurt money making. I am planning to go dive a little more into it, do some proper tests of it, trying to simulate what this will actually do to the mission board and some of the known money making spots. So that's going to come out later when I get a little bit of time to dive into it. Let's move on to some real space news here. Now, last week I mentioned that there was a hole in the ISS, which at the time was assumed to be from a micrometeor strike. And it was a little funny feel-good story where they plugged the hole with their fingers and duct tape, and it has of course been properly repaired now. Now, there's been some images out of the actual hole, and it turns out that the hole is not from a meteor strike, but was actually man-made. Now, this has started a lot of speculations of why someone would drill the hole in the side of their own space station, and especially around the story that it's some of the astronauts or cosmonauts, because it's in the Russian module, I guess, who drilled it because they wanted to go home early. I'm not sure if that's true. Obviously, no one is at the moment. I think it's still being investigated. What I think is more likely is that the hole was drilled on the ground and then repaired. Maybe the hole was drilled and thought they would install something there. It turned out they didn't have to install something there. So they repaired the hole in the station before it was actually launched, and just after the station has now spent a lot of time in space, maybe that repair failed. And there's a chance that the hole was plugged, and I don't know why they would just weld it shut, but I don't know, I don't build space stations. But at least they're theorizing that it could actually have been created on Earth, and then the repair has just failed. Now there's been in space for some time. But of course, there was also the chance that it was drilled in space and it was someone actually sabotaging the space station. Now, of course, I'll try to follow this story, see what happens over the next couple of weeks as this investigation goes on. I don't know how long this is going to take. It could potentially take months, so it might be a while before we hear anything. But at least I think it's interesting that it turns out that at least it was not a meteor strike after all. Okay, the last thing I need to mention is, of course, tomorrow's live stream, Tuesday at 7 o'clock in-game time, usual time spot. We're of course going to be playing Elite, but not quite. I mentioned this last week that I wanted to do a shipbuilding live stream where I take suggestions from you guys and then we try to build it either in Coriolis or Edie shipyard. And I just want to talk about some of the different steps that I go through. I did do a video on it recently, but I still want to try and do it live and I think it could be fun. I've already received quite a few suggestions for ship builds, and I'll pick someone out. I'll pick some of them out, and we'll do those during the live stream. I don't know how many we're going to be able to do, but I'll do as many as I can during the live stream, where people have various criteria for the ships they want to build. So we're going to have a look at that. That's going to all happen tomorrow, and you still have time. Pretty much, if I have it before the stream starts, preferably a few hours before, so I have time to look at it beforehand. But if you have an idea for a ship that you either already have built or want to build, and you either want to see how I would build it or want feedback on our existing build, send it to me. And remember to send information like, is there any limit in terms of credit, how much money we can spend on the ship? Is there any limit in terms of engineering, how much engineering we put on it? Guardian tech, power play, weapons, all that jazz. Remember to put that in there so I know if there's any limitations. Otherwise, I might just end up doing something that's far away from what you actually wanted. But yeah, my email is in the description, downtoearthastronomy@gmail.com. You can send it to that, and I'll have a look at it. And I hope I'll see a lot of you to the live stream tomorrow. But I think I'm gonna spare my voice for now before I completely cough up my throat. So thanks a lot for watching this week. If you liked the stream, give a like, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, I will see you guys in space.